Gadgets are one of the most interesting additions to the game and can dictate how good a brawler will be in the meta. Not all gadgets are created equal. Some are good, some are bad, some are decent, and so on. A while back, to be more exact, 3 months ago, I revisited some of Brawl Stars' worst gadgets of all time. However, because there are almost 200 gadgets in the game if you count the old ones, I couldn't include all of them, so I decided to make a part 2. First of all, I got a pen and paper and rewatched part 1. When I say I rewatched, I just opened the script of the video still saved on my computer and noted all the gadgets already mentioned. After some research, I chose 10 more gadgets for this list, but there are still more, so part 3 may happen in the future. With all that being said, be sure to leave this video a like if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you want to support my YouTube channel. Let's get right into this. First, we have Poco's second gadget, Protective Tunes. It removes active adverse effects like poison or fire from friendly brawlers in a large area and grants immunity for a short period of time. At release, it only provided 1 second of immunity, but the gadget received 2 buffs that increased the immunity period from 1 to 2 seconds and then from 2 to 4 seconds, which is the current stat. At launch, this gadget was ineffective. Now, with the increased immunity period, it is still not great. It is just too situational and only works against brawlers like Crow, Willow, Amber, and maybe others. Those are the ones that come to my mind at the moment. In ladder matches, you are better off using his first gadget, Tuning Fork, which is much better and more versatile than this gadget. However, in ranked play, it's a different story. When you are above Diamond, at the start of the match, there is a drafting period during which each team chooses brawlers in turns. During this time, you can change your gadgets, star powers, and gears. If any of the brawlers mentioned earlier are chosen, you can switch to this gadget to counter their abilities. Still, it's uncertain how much that will help during the match, and it is much safer to go with his first gadget. Next is Rosa's first gadget, Grow Light. It simply creates some bushes around Rosa. That's it. It's completely garbage, and you shouldn't use it at all. The only use I see is to connect bushes with each other, but it only works on maps with a lot of bushes, and there are not many in the map pool. Just use her second gadget, Unfriendly Bushes. It's just miles better than this gadget will ever be. Next on the list is Rico's first gadget, the Multi-Ball Launcher. Rico blasts waves of bouncing bullets in all directions. This gadget is currently very good, but at release was somewhat underwhelming, only dealing 320 damage per bullet. Because the damage was low, it ended up receiving 2 buffs that increased the damage per bullet from 320 to 800, and then from 800 to 819. With this buff, it now scales with power levels, meaning the damage increases with each level after level 7. Because these buffs made the gadget very good, it ended up receiving 2 nerfs, decreasing its damage per bullet from 819 to 717, and then from 717 to 615. This gadget has a very interesting history, starting off poorly but ending up being a very good gadget nowadays. Next on the list is Daryl's first gadget, the Recoiling Rotator. Daryl spins around and sprays a barrage of shots in all directions. This gadget is very similar to the previous one, but the bullets don't have as long range as the other gadget bullets, and they also don't bounce when hitting a wall. At release, it had good damage of 700 per bullet, but it had the drawback of stopping your movement. This was removed 2 months later, and in the same balance change, it also made the gadget charge 25% of the super. However, the damage per bullet was nerfed from 700 to 400, and it stayed that way for a while until it received a buff that increased its damage per bullet from 400 to 480 and now scales with power levels. Throughout its history, this gadget has been bad. At release, it had good damage, but it had the drawback of stopping your movement, and now it has bad damage, with the only good feature being that it charges 25% of your super. The next one has gone through so many changes compared to any gadget on this list, and it is Carl's first gadget, the Heat Ejector. Upon release, it spawned a fire trail behind you that dealt 300 damage per second if you stayed in the fire. Initially, it only worked when an enemy was following you, and if the enemy was smart, they could easily avoid it. Even if you were lucky enough to get someone to touch the fire, it only dealt 300 damage because people are not that foolish to stay in the fire and take constant damage. So yes, this gadget needed a lot of changes to improve it, and it got them. It received 2 buffs to its damage, first from 300 to 400 and then from 400 to 600, but the mechanics remained the same, so it was still awful. It was reworked, which meant that if you touched the fire, it would deal damage over time, even if you stepped out of the fire for a duration of 4 seconds. But the damage was nerfed from 600 to 300. It was a good change, but because it still spawned behind you, it was still ineffective. They then modified it to follow Carl's next main attack, which meant you could aim it and actually get value out of it. However, the damage was too low, so it received 3 buffs, first from 300 to 500, then from 500 to 528, and now it scales with power levels, ultimately from 528 to 592. Even after these buffs, it was still underwhelming, so it received another one, but this time it was different. Instead of increasing its damage, it now contributed to charging Carl's super. So you want to say to me this gadget never charged Carl's super until this point? Even after playing for so many years, I didn't know that. This buff was so significant that it resulted in this gadget receiving its first nerf, which decreased the supercharge rate by 70%. That's a lot. For almost its entire history, this gadget was garbage, and the only moment it was good was when it received the buff that allowed the fire damage to charge Carl's super. For the next one, I was planning only to include its release form, but because of a recent balance change, I will also include the current form, and that it is Piper's first gadget, Auto Aimer. At release, it fired 4 homing bullets that dealt 500 damage each in a very large radius. But most of the time, you only hit 1 or, if you are lucky, 2 people. You could have hit all 4 of the bullets up close, but you kind of don't want that with Piper because the closer the enemy is, the lower damage you will deal. This gadget was ineffective and was changed to what we know today, firing 1 bullet that knocks back the enemy and slows them for 1 second, which made the gadget very good, especially in situations when you didn't have the super. However, a recent balance change changed everything and removed its 1 second slow, which made the gadget useless. I mean, even with the knockback, the enemy can still easily approach you. At least before, the slow gave you enough time to get distance from an enemy. This gadget was very good across its history, but its release version was useless, same as its current version. The next one is Gale's first gadget spring ejector. Gale drops a bounce pad underfoot, launching friend and foe alike into the air. I feel like this gadget, it's useless and gets outclassed by Gale's second gadget, Twister. At least, at release, the jump pad launched you further than now. The only moment this gadget it would be good is to get faster to the hot zone circle. But to be real, the second gadget would still get way more value than this one. The next one is Belle's second gadget, Reverse Polarity. Belle's next main attack bounces off walls. It's a cool idea but poorly executed, and there won't be many occasions where you'll get value from it. If you have bad aim, this gadget is useless. You're better off using her other gadget, Nest Egg, which, while not the best in the game, is still decent and can provide good value during a match. The next one is Buzz Lightyear's Gadget Turbo Boosters. It's pretty much Shelly's gadget, but with a longer dash. There is not too much to complain about. After all, it's a temporary brawler, and we didn't pay anything to get it. However, since I did include Shelly's and the other dash gadgets in the game, with the exception of Maisie's in Part 1, it is logical to include this as well in Part 2. The last one is Jean's second gadget, Vengeful Spirits. Jean shoots a homing missile at all visible enemies within a large area. This gadget feels like an auto-aimer release version, but with a few differences. It will target an enemy until it hits a wall or the enemy, and based on the distance, it will deal more damage. At release, it had a maximum damage of 800. I'm not sure what the minimum was, but now it is 400. Its damage got buffed from 800 to 1000, then from 1000 to 1229, and it scales with power levels. After that, it was adjusted from 1229 to 1280. Even with all these buffs, this is still a useless gadget. Never use it. Alright guys, that was my second revisitation of some of Brawl Stars' worst gadgets of all time. If you enjoyed this video and you're still here listening to the end, thank you. Be sure to leave a like because that's what helps push these videos out, and subscribe to support my YouTube channel in becoming an official Supercell creator. Let me know what you thought of this list. I read almost every single comment, so drop one below. With all that said, I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.